January 17th, 1950. A seemingly ordinary night in Boston. Beneath the surface, 11 men, driven by greed and ambition, pulled off the crime of the century. One of the most meticulously planned robberies in U.S. history. In less than 35 minutes, they would vanish with over $30 million in today's money. This is the story of a heist that shook the nation. A story that inspired one of the most successful movies in Hollywood. An operation that would later crash down, all because of a single man with a grudge. This is the story of the Great Brinks robbery, the real Ocean's 11. In the 1940s, there was a well-known building in Boston, a building famous not for historical importance, but because this particular building was playing the role of a huge safe, holding millions of dollars in cash, checks, and other valuable items. A building that belonged to Brinks, a financial security company based in Boston, Massachusetts. At the time, the Brinks building was considered to be one of the most secure buildings in the whole country, an unbreakable safe no one dared to challenge. However, someone wasn't quite convinced. Anthony Pino, a career criminal known for his petty thefts in the North End of Boston, started to flirt with the idea of breaking into Brinks. In 1947, after months of gathering intel about the building, he realized he wouldn't be able to get the job done on his own. He needed a team, but not any team. He turned to Joseph McGinnis, a legend in Boston's underworld, a man who commanded respect and knew the city's dark corners like the back of his hand. They needed muscle, so they brought in Joseph Specs O'Keefe and Stanley Gusciora, tough guys who could intimidate anyone. Vincent Costa, Pino's brother-in-law, serving as the lookout. John Banfield, a trusted man of McGinnis, would be the getaway driver. To round out their team, they recruited James Ignatius Fierdy, a master of armed robbery, with the addition of Adolph Maffei, Michael Vincent Keegan, Thomas Francis Richardson, and Henry Baker. 11 men, each with their own skills and motivations, united by a shared hunger for a fortune that seemed impossible to obtain. Once the task of assembling the crew was complete, Pino needed a plan. He knew that this could take months to figure out, but he and the team had all the time in the world. The crew's plan needed to be perfect, a quick in and out with no evidence behind. But a perfect plan must involve carefully executed steps, from observation all the way to reliable alibis. The months leading up to the robbery were a blur of careful planning. Pino studied the schedules, the shipments, the daily routine, even the way the lights flickered on and off. His biggest challenge? The money was on the second floor, guarded by 5 locked doors. But Pino had a plan. He and his crew broke into the building after hours, stealing 1 lock cylinder at a time. They used these stolen cylinders to make keys, then carefully replaced the originals, leaving no trace of their intrusion. They even stole a green 1949 Ford Stake body truck, serving as their escape vehicle. They spent November and December perfecting their getaway route, practicing until every turn and stop was ingrained in their minds. They even designed their disguises, navy pea coats, gloves, chauffeur's caps, and rubber Halloween masks that completely hid their faces. They made several attempts, getting close, but always pulling back, waiting for the perfect moment. Finally, on January 17th, 1950, they were ready. The crew met in Roxbury, loaded into the truck, and drove towards their target. Inside the Brinks depot, the crew moved with precision. They forced the employees to the ground, tied their hands, and taped their mouths shut. In just 35 minutes, they had emptied the vault, filling bags with $1.5 million in cash. They vanished into the night, following their carefully planned escape route. Costa fled in a stolen sedan. Geoghegan established his alibi. Pino and Fierty quickly disappeared to create their own, and Banfield disposed of the truck, leaving no trace of their crime. They had pulled off the perfect heist, or so they thought. The federal statute of limitations was just 3 years, but the state statute was 6. If they could just outlast that 6-year window, the money would be theirs, and they could never be brought to justice. The clock was ticking. The sirens went off, and within minutes of the robbery, police officers and FBI special agents descended upon the Brinks building. But they were met with a chilling silence. The terrified employees couldn't offer any useful information. They said the robbers were professionals. Their movements were studied and almost robotic. They spoke very little, only leaving behind a mask, tape, and one discarded hat. However, one employee did mention 4 guns, providing a serial number for one. The authorities had a starting point. 2 weeks later, a group of boys playing near the Mystic River found one of the stolen guns, rusted and useless. The next day, another gun was found by a police officer, which also turned out useless due to its terrible condition. They began interviewing potential leads, along with past and present Brinks employees. Brinks even offered a $100,000 reward for information. Finally, people started talking. One witness described a green Ford truck with a canvas top parked near the Brinks building the day of the heist. After a month of research, truck parts were discovered at a dump in Stoughton, Massachusetts, confirming the truck's identity. But the location only pointed to 2 men on the authorities' radar, O'Keefe and Gusciora. When questioned, they claimed they had gone out drinking in Boston around 7 p.m. With no concrete evidence, the authorities had to let them go. But starting June the same year, things started to go south for Pino and his crew. For Pino's crew, robbing the Brinks building was extremely hard to pull off. But what was even harder was staying off the radar for the entire 6 years. There were 2 crew members who simply couldn't resist their criminal urges. O'Keefe and Gusciora kept going on what they'd call road trips, which was code for burglaries. On one of their road trips in Pennsylvania, the 2 ended up getting caught and arrested. O'Keefe was sentenced to 3 years, and Gusciora was facing 5 to 20 years in prison. While they served their time, the FBI started noticing a bizarre pattern. The 2 weren't writing back to their families. However, they were writing to a group of men back in Boston, asking them to support their legal defense fund. This group included Pino, McGinnis, Mappy, and Baker. The same group, questioned the following weeks of the robbery, are now writing to each other several months later. Authorities knew something was off. They immediately brought back the group for further questioning. Pino claimed he had been at home until about 7 p.m. before heading to a nearby liquor store owned by none other than Joseph McGinnis, a story confirmed by a Boston police officer who was present at the store. Maffei could not provide an alibi, but Baker insisted he was at home having dinner with his family before leaving at 7 p.m. for a 2-hour walk, during which he claimed he encountered no one. Armed robbery specialist James Fairdy claimed to have been out drinking between 5:10 p.m. and 7:45 p.m. John Banfield said he had been drunk since New Year's Eve, yet an ex-girlfriend reported seeing him stone cold sober on the night of the heist. If you haven't noticed, there's a clear pattern. Around 7 p.m., each suspect had independently decided to change locations, making their whereabouts murky during the critical window of 7:10 p.m. to 7:27 p.m., the exact time of the heist. In prison, O'Keefe and Gusciora remained calm, revealing nothing to anyone. On November 25th, 1952, a federal grand jury convened to examine the case, as the federal statute of limitations was rapidly approaching its end. Authorities hoped this grand jury would elicit information from witnesses or the suspects themselves, but the jury had nothing of concrete to work with. By January 1953, 3 years after the heist, the jury concluded there wasn't enough evidence to arrest anyone. Pino's crew were safe, but they still had 3 more years to go. 3 years felt like 3 decades for the crew. Over the next year, O'Keefe would go in and out of jail. Each time he contacted the same group of men, pressuring them for financial help. Each time the men grew more and more sour. The air in Boston was thick with tension. March 1954 marked O'Keefe's return, and he wasted no time reuniting with the other suspects. 2 months later, O'Keefe, with a partner in tow, pulled an inexplicable move. They kidnapped Pino's brother-in-law, Costa, holding him captive in a hotel room. 2 days later, following the payment of the ransom, they let Costa go. During police interviews, everyone claimed ignorance, but one thing was crystal clear. O'Keefe had become a liability, and he needed to be dealt with. On June 5th, 1954, O'Keefe found himself at the center of his first assassination attempt. A suspicious car approached. Sensing danger, he instinctively slouched in his seat, narrowly dodging bullets that shattered the windshield. This was just the beginning. Just 2 days later, the second assassination attempt unfolded. This time, O'Keefe was shot in the chest, but somehow managed to survive. Realizing the mess he was in, he made the decision to flee Boston. However, his escape was short-lived, as he was arrested for possessing a firearm. Violating his parole, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Pino knew that having 10 associates would eventually hunt him down. In January 1955, getaway driver Banfield died of natural causes. 1 down, 10 to go. While authorities felt they were rounding up the suspects, they still had not located any of the money. But they saw the tension within the group as an opportunity to get someone to talk. In prison, O'Keefe was still writing letters to other suspects demanding financial support. With each letter getting ignored, his frustration grew. The clock was ticking. FBI agents, relentless in their pursuit, repeatedly visited O'Keefe, hoping to crack his silence. By December 1955, a shift occurred. O'Keefe's disdain for his former accomplices grew. On January 6, 1956, O'Keefe sat down with the agents and uttered the fateful words.
"All right, what do you want to know?"
Pino and his crew had waited 5 years, 11 months, and 20 days. They were just 11 days away from claiming the money as theirs. 11 days. On January 12th, the net closed in. Baker, Keegan, Maffei, Costa, McGinnis, and Pino were all apprehended. The following day, a Suffolk County grand jury issued indictments for the entire crew, using O'Keefe as their star witness. Faherty and Richardson fled, becoming fugitives on the FBI's most wanted list. But their escape was short-lived. They were caught hiding in a Dorchester apartment. Gushira was transferred to a Massachusetts prison. On July 9th, he slipped and hit his head in a cell, dying a few hours later. 2 down, 9 to go. The trial of the remaining men started in Boston on August 6th. Each was sentenced to life imprisonment for armed robbery, with additional sentences ranging from 2 to 10 years for conspiracy, theft, and breaking and entering. O'Keefe was the only one to plead guilty. He received a more lenient sentence of just 4 years. 11 down. But there's one question we haven't answered yet. Where is the money? On June 3rd, 1956, a man suspected of circulating counterfeit bills was apprehended by police in Baltimore. During the search, officers discovered over $1,000 in his possession. However, the investigation deepened when they found nearly $4,000 hidden in his hotel room. Among the cash recovered, police matched the serial numbers of $4,635 to those of the bills stolen in the infamous Great Brinks robbery. Under pressure, the man revealed the name of his associate, known as Fat Joe. Authorities swiftly tracked down Fat Joe, leading them to a concealed metal container hidden behind a wall panel. Inside this container lay piles of cash, totaling nearly $60,000, identified from the Brinks heist. Much of the money was found in a state of decomposition. Despite these discoveries, over $1.1 million of the money stolen has remained missing to this day.